Now that we have the shutter system and lens cleaned up and put back together, we're going to concentrate on the lens body case, where we need to clean up the old grease and reapply the grease again on certain areas. So just like in my previous videos, I'm just going to use some isopropyl alcohol and an old toothbrush or whatever brush that you want to use, and just go crazy with it and just get into all the areas that had the grease. And if you don't want to use isopropyl alcohol, you could use warm water with soap, and that would do pretty much the same thing as cleaning goes. Sometimes you do want to take a pointy object, whether it's a toothpick or part of your tweezers or any of those dental tools, to kind of get into the helicoids, to get some of the grime and grease off as well that the brush can't get. Just make sure that you don't, for thinner threads, that you don't use too big of a tool to destroy the threading, and just be gentle, taking any kind of dirt or grime that's off. Now that we have everything cleaned up, we're just gonna reassemble everything, starting with the top portion of the body, which involves putting in the shutter and the aperture rings to it. And again, if you need a refresher, you can look at the first part of the video where I've disassembled everything. Kind of gives you an idea as well. But for now, we're just going to grab the ones for the shutter. So you're going to line up where the hole for the screw and the slot connect. I'm just going to grab and that should stop it. Once that's installed, we're going to put in the lock ring onto the shutter ring. And just before I do that, I'm just going to add just a touch of grease onto the area where the lock ring goes. This way it creates a smooth surface. When I say a little bit, I've taken a little bit of the grease and wiped the excess off with a paper towel, and I'm just gonna put just a touch. When that's complete, I'm just gonna put the lock ring back in its place. There's basically a little groove that it sits in, and you're just pushing it towards that area. Alright, next we have the aperture ring, and the same thing. I'm just going to apply a little bit of that grease just on the opposite side by doing the same thing, taking a little bit of the excess and just wiping it off. As you don't need it for heavy movements, just enough that it's there. Alright, and now you're just going to line that hole towards that slot right here. And then making sure that you're using the right screws for the purpose. There we go. So to place the depth of scale ring to the main body, a few things going to happen. We'll have to put in the dial for the flash loosely into its position, and then we'll also have to put in the spring, which I've already have, and the bearing that connects to the holes of the aperture ring. And while this is also happening, we'll need to put in the wires through their respective holes. This one's for the black and this one's for the red. So just to kind of dry fit it, where the connection for the black wire happens on the ring, there's a flat surface on the main body with the hole, and that's where it kind of lines up. So when it goes in and everything fits nicely, then this is where we'll put in the black wire and the red wire through their holes. So it's going to be a little bit tricky, while at the same time hopefully we don't drop the bearing that connects to the body. So to do so, I'm going to add a little bit of grease onto the spring, and this one hopefully will keep the ball bearing in its place. Just like so. And we're just going to put in the dial making sure that we place it in the correct position. And then we're just going to turn this around. Just being extra careful. Next, I'm just going to put in the black wire. You may need to use some kind of tweezers, pull it through. At the same time making sure that you don't break or damage the wires. So I'm just going to insert just a little bit. And then the same thing for the red wire. There might be a chance that you'll need to play around with the ring a little bit. In order to bring them through. Right. Make sure you keep the pressure in. Now you have the spring bouncing on you. We're just going to use these screws, which will connect onto these bodies here, and we're just gonna put them in for now to kind of keep things in place. This way it will allow us to take this screw here and to put it back on. And that should lock it in place. And you got the first portion of the rings in place. So just gonna check. Next, we're just going to place the top portion of the helicoid onto here, and that's what screws these into it as well. So just going to push in those screws in out, grease this part of the helicoid. Now, to line up the helicoid to this body, there's going to be this silver piece here that will act as a reference, and when you place it from the top view, it's going to be near the black wire, and all you're doing is aligning each of these holes to these screws here, and you're just gonna pushing it into position like so. And you're going to use the screwdrivers to tighten it. And before you over tighten, just ensure that all the screws are in first before you commence tightening the rest. And there you have the top all set up and done. Next, we're gonna grease the outer helicoid as well, and there's two spots for that to be greased, the inner and then the outer. So we're just gonna do the outside first. Once you have it greased, we're gonna look for the marking that we did, which was around here, and that was aligned with the PC flash. So you're gonna have to try to do this as flush as possible, and just take your time to not cross thread it. And once you find that grip, it should allow you to place it in. Once you find that spot, just twist it back in. And if we go back to where we marked this, hopefully you can see it. That's where I marked the groove. When I initially took this off. Just gonna play with the grease a bit, and everything seems to be next. We're gonna put in this ring, and I'm just gonna put in just a little bit of grease on the bottom. So this ring goes in like so, with the teeth facing outwards. And then we're just going to quickly grease the inside here. And I'm just going to put a little bit around here for the brass ring. Once we grease this ring, we're going to align this line here with this line here. And make sure that the inner ring goes in. And you can see where we first etched these two lines that align it when it's nice and flush, as when I marked it, and just kind of insert it in. Next, we're going to take this tab and install it to this body first, which will make it easier to align it into this hole right here. So it's going to go in like so. Just align the holes. No need to over tighten yet until you get both ends in. Once you do, then you can go ahead and tighten. Once we have this tab in, we're just going to grease a little bit on the edge here. To help it slip it in, and at the same time after that, we're going to align these tabs, this slot, into the designated areas. So we're just going to slip this So when you have the bottom placed, ensure that the brass ring that's inside sits at the lower end of the lens. So when you put in the grommets, it actually sits above it. Now go ahead and install the grommets. Making sure that you take your time, as these are easily ruined if not careful. Once you have them all in, go ahead and tighten them. Okay, should look something like that. Next, we'll install the focusing ring. You'll notice that there's a screw that has a little nub, and that will go into the slot right here. Once you insert it in and twist it, it should put you at around infinity, or exactly at infinity. And just go ahead and place the screws. Once you have all the screws in, just make sure they're all tight. And now to test. So next we're going to put in the platform for the lens. There's a little notch that's on the side that goes into this little slot here. So you'll have to match this with that, plus matching these little slots for the shutter and the cocking tabs. Best way to do so is just kind of lay it on the side, match the edge, and just be wary of your wires. So once you have everything aligned, it should snap in place. It will take you a bit to get it right. Just be patient and have it all set up. Once it's in, grab the bracket and just align it to the holes. And just place the screws in there. So now that we have the body fully assembled, we're going to add the shutter system. I have removed the lens so I don't damage it or scratch it while placing it inside the body. So we're going to have to solder the red wire and the black wire back. So we're going to place this, making sure that we match each component to where it needs to be. So we're going to put the So ensuring that each of the tabs are connected to the respective rods. Now the only thing we'll have to do is solder the two black wires together, and then we're going to have to solder the red to the tab that's sitting in here. Next, we're going to use the retaining ring that holds the lens body to the shutter system. And we're just going to just slowly thread it in until you feel that it's latched in. Then we're just going to use the spanner to just tighten it in. After that, we're just going to add a little bit of grease to the mounting bracket. So you simply screw this back on, keeping in mind that there's a screw that goes in between this groove that allows it to lock in and lock out. So here's the spot. That's perfect. And lastly, the front plate gets screwed back on. And here you have the Fujinon 100mm f3.5 lens, all done and ready to go. The aperture setting is snappy. You no longer hear that grinding noise when we first started it. And to check for shutter speed, just flip it over. There is a tab that cocks the shutter. And then the release. I want to thank you for watching, and tune in next time for the next episode.